At the end of this video, you will know some of the best solutions we have to solve climate change. Scientists have proven that climate change kills hundreds of thousands every year, and it will kill much more in the future, potentially you or the people you love. But it cannot be solved if you don't take 20 minutes of your time to listen carefully and be the solution. If you don't listen until the end with all your attention to be the solution, scientists have warned us that it will be much worse than COVID. So there's no doubt that this 20 minutes will be worth your full focus. The solution has 3 parts. 1. Understand well the problem. 2. Change of system. 3. The individual actions we should all do. Part 1. Understand well the problem. For those who don't know yet, climate change, also called global warming, is caused by the greenhouse gases we all emit. What are greenhouse gases? The main gases we emit are carbon dioxide, CO2, and methane, CH4. We emit CO2, for example, when we use petrol cars, planes, or to build all the products we buy. We emit methane, CH4, because we eat so many cows and their flatulence contains methane. Additionally, methane is also trapped in frozen soil called permafrost. So as the climate warms, the permafrost releases methane, and in a vicious cycle, the climate warms even more. This increases the temperature because these gases trap the sun like a blanket. When you understand this comes a question that will decide the future of humanity: health or death. The question is, why should we make huge sacrifices to fight climate change? To understand, we need to know what will happen if we don't stop polluting. What is the best case and what is the worst case? We have already started to see the best case. Best case if we don't change. 1. More deadly heat waves. Heat waves that have already caused 35,000 people to die in Europe in 2003. In the future, this will become a normal summer in many countries. 2. More deadly flooding. Flooding with more than 2.3 billion victims and 157,000 killed. 3. More droughts, which leads to lack of food, which leads to wars for eating. Droughts causing less food. Every degree the earth warms leads to a 10% reduction in crop yields. 4. More destruction of marine life, which leads to lack of food. Destruction of marine life, as shown in this picture, the heat destroys the coral where fish live and thrive. These 2 consequences of climate change combined means lack of food and water while the population increases. Our future is likely to know wars for food and water. 5. More wildfires burning cities and killing through smoke. Devastating wildfires, killing an average of approximately 339,000 people every year, including through smoke emissions. 6. Increased risk of diseases and new diseases. Increased risk of diseases, as we know bacteria proliferate better with hotter temperatures, and the lack of water for sanitation. Studies also show that the destruction of nature through deforestation and the resulting loss of wildlife increases new infectious diseases like COVID-19. I will stop there, but the list continues. What about the worst case if we don't change? The truth is that we are in the unknown. We know it is going to be bad, but we don't know how bad. A very good metaphor to understand this is to imagine that you are heading towards a waterfall. You don't wait to discover how high the waterfall is to know how high you will fall and maybe die. No, you start swimming opposite to the water flow. Same for climate change. We have to do everything we can to avoid the waterfall, which is a metaphor for what happens around and above 2 degrees of global warming. If you still want an idea of what the worst case could look like, this scientific paper that you can find in the references has shown evidence that we risk a similar future as the biggest extinction that killed 96% of life on Earth. It was caused by volcanoes emitting CO2 250 million years ago. Could humanity really go extinct, and how? It is a risk, but it is a complex topic, so I will do another video about it. Who among us is an expert in climate science who knows enough to have the arrogance of pretending that he or she knows better than the experts? It takes a PhD in climate science to understand and challenge what scientists say. It is not something we can understand in a few weeks using Google. So the most clever and humble thing to do when we don't know better is to trust the scientists. Anything else is pure arrogance. Here is what happens when we don't listen to scientists. Have a look at this article from the BBC where a scientist, Dr. Johnson, warned us that a new pandemic could happen 2 years before COVID. So he told us how we should prepare to avoid COVID 2 years before it happened. Now imagine if we listened to Dr. Johnson. Did you lose someone during COVID? That person might be still alive if we listened to scientists. And all these months locked at home, we could have avoided that if we had listened to scientists. And now the scientists are warning us about the next crisis. Climate change, they tell us clearly that if we don't reduce the greenhouse gases we emit, we will suffer much more than COVID in the future. Many of us do the same mistake. We try to predict the future by looking at the present, but this doesn't work. Could you predict COVID before it happened by looking at the present? No. It is the same for climate change. We cannot look at the present to predict the future. The best way to know what will happen is to listen to scientists and to prepare for the worst case. Because sometimes even scientists disagree, which is normal on really complex topics. So what we should do is take the worst case and do our best to avoid it. Anything else is madness. We cannot just take a chance about the survival of humanity. And for sure, never listen to all the selfish people who invent lies because they don't want to do any effort to reduce climate change. This is famous psychology. It is called denial. Instead of looking at the truth and facts, instead of listening to the scientists, some people will lie to themselves. Don't be one of them, and don't listen to them. More people, including their families, will die because of them. It is very bad behavior that should be harshly condemned. Solution Part 2. Change the system. Let's make something clear. The solution is not to rely on politicians for 2 reasons. First, because we are in a democracy, which means that the politicians are supposed to do what we want. I repeat, in a democracy, the politicians are not supposed to do something we don't want, so it must start with us. Second, politicians have known about climate change for the past 30 years, and they have done very little because they receive a lot of pressure from big companies who want to continue to pollute to make money. Third, many of us know that we need a new system, but politicians do not propose a new system. They propose the same system with some ecological changes. It will not be enough because they do not think outside of the box. Like Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that created the problem. The solution will also not come from technology. Technology can help, but realistically, it will be far from enough. So what is the solution? Simple. This crisis has been created by all of us through our day-to-day pollution, and it will take as many of us as possible to stop it. It is very simple to start. All we have to start is with ourselves. Make sure that we do our best to reduce our own pollution, and then inspire others around us to do the same. Let's see what actions we can do as individuals to have a maximum impact. As we will see, most actions also have an impact on the system because when I do what is right, others around me start to feel bad and also do what is right. This was proven by the scientific study, do leaders who give up flying because of climate change influence the attitudes and behavior of others? Scientists proved that when someone, for example, gave up flying, most people around at least reduced flying and some stopped flying. We have to stop thinking that there is a clear separation between individual actions and systemic actions. In fact, many actions we take as individuals have an effect on the system because we influence others around us, but also because if we buy less of some polluting products or services, the companies have to adapt and stop proposing them, so the system changes. 1. Let's start with the vote. Voting is an individual action that can have a huge impact on the system if we all vote for politicians who care about ecology. But if we want a change, we should be clear. What change? The system currently dominating the world is called the free market. It simply means that people are free to do business with each other, consume all the resources they want, and free to pollute. And obviously, this is where the crises come from. Free to consume without limits or protecting the environment. The free market is very good at providing us with what we need in the short term, but in the long term, it will cause all of us a lot of pain. And many of us will die from the ecological crises, including climate change, but also other crises. So what is the solution? It's not right-wing politics or left-wing politics, because both right and left politics are a deadlock. They can't solve these crises. People who vote right make a good point. When you give more power to politicians, it rarely ends well. We usually see inefficiency, corruption, and failure to solve the problems. That's why all the communist countries failed. There's no reason to expect better from the government to solve climate change. There will be corruption and inefficiency. But people who vote left also make a good point. When you put all the power in the free market, there is another problem. The ultra-rich people get most of the power, and we see corruption as well. For example, Exxon has paid to avoid doing something about climate change for more than 30 years. Many of us know that we need a new system, but even our politicians do not propose a new system. So are we blocked? No. There is a new system that can solve all our problems and do something that most of us thought impossible. Make people voting right and voting left agree. And that's what we need to fight climate change. We need union, not division. So, what is this new system? This topic is complex, so if you want to know more, read the book A New Way of Life by Sammy Barnett. You can find the link in the description. Or, if you can wait, subscribe to this channel or follow this page as I will do a video about it. Part 3. The individual actions we must all do to fight climate change. You can find in the description a scientific study used as a basis to classify the highest impact actions that we all can do to reduce our greenhouse gases. Here is a list based on it from the highest impact to the lowest impact. 2. Have less children. Let's be clear that obviously does not concern children already born. It only concerns the parents who did not decide yet how many children they want to have. Obviously, every extra life on this earth means a lot more pollution, CO2 emissions, and consumption of resources. It doesn't mean have zero children, it just means that we must find a reasonable limit of children, so that these children can grow up in a world free of wars for food and water. We need studies to know accurately how many children per person our environment can support, but as a rough idea, 2 children maximum is a good start because, as you can see on this website, this is the average number the world is moving toward anyway. You can find the link in the references. Of course, we should never shame anyone who had more children than this in the past. We did not know what we know now. But once we know, we have no excuses. Those who choose to have 3, 4, 5, or more children now are basically sending the signal that everyone can do the same, and this will cause more climate change, more overexploitation of our environment, causing lack of food and water, pain and death in the future, including potentially for their own children. Have a look at this report in the description if you want evidence of future lack of water. 3. Live car-free or use the least polluting transports. So many of us living in cities can replace car with public transport. If this means more time for you, you can do so many things during this time. Listen to podcasts, to music. Saving ourselves a few hours per day is not more important than risking the extinction of humanity or wars in the future. For those who have no public transport to go to work and no other way to use a car to go to work and feed their family, then you have 3 solutions. Try as soon as possible to get a new job closer to home, or buy an electric car, or if you can't afford an electric car, at least make sure that you drive a car with the lowest weight possible and tires always well inflated, as this will pollute less. 4. Stop flying. I get it. Many of us like to travel, but do you love to travel more than to be a good person? Do you love to travel more than you love to have a future without wars? Do you love to travel more than you love your children? It is a real question because protecting your children and taking the plane are not compatible. I hope you answered no to all these questions, because if you are not ready to do efforts for your own children or your own future, then it will be very hard for me to convince you. We can all continue to do tourism, but more local. Nature is so beautiful everywhere, so instead of paying so much money to fly and destroy our future, why not learn to admire and protect the nature where we are? For business flights, we got used to video meetings. There's no reason to go back to a more polluting way. And if you live far from those you love, make it a priority to find a job closer to them so that you can visit them by taking the train, not the plane. 5. Reduce meat consumption. A plant-based diet is ideal, but for those who want to keep meat, at least favor more eco-friendly meat. Fish, chicken and turkey, and pork are better for climate change. Beef and lamb are worse for climate change and increase risk of cardiovascular disease, colorectal cancer, and type 2 diabetes. You can check the scientific studies by clicking the link in the description. 6. Purchase green energy. Electricity and heating are a big part of the greenhouse gases we emit, so we need to save money if necessary to switch to the greenest supplier possible, or for those who can, buy solar panels. 7. Reduce food waste. Food waste contributes to 6% of greenhouse gas emissions and wastes our natural resources. On top of that, you lose a lot of money. For example, in the UK, the equivalent of $600 per year per household is lost because of food waste. Imagine what you could do with this money. It is definitely worth the effort to be very careful to buy only what we will consume. We can use a list, and when we see that some of the things we buy past the expiration date, either 1. Reduce the quantity we buy, or 2. Regularly check your fridge to make sure you are not forgetting to consume something that will soon expire. Also, a tip is to do shopping when we are not hungry, because when we are hungry, that makes us want to buy more. 8. Conserve energy. There are so many things you can do. Double glazing windows, walls, and door insulation are all investments. A short-term expense, but in the long term, you will save money and protect the environment. Wear warm clothes and reduce your heater to a minimum. Hang dry clothes. Lower the water temperature from 60 to 30 to save 2/3 of the electricity. Unplug your devices when not using them, or use a power strip with a switch so you can turn several devices off with the touch of a button. Turn off all unnecessary lights and use energy-saving light bulbs. Avoid espresso machines that use aluminum capsules. A lot of energy is used to produce them, and they have a huge negative environmental impact. The position of the fridge is also important. Place the fridge in a cold place away from heat sources, and don't set the temperature lower than necessary. For every degree lower you set it, it uses 4% more electricity. And remember, when you go on holiday, always defrost it and switch it off. Reduce lawn mowing. And of course, the list continues. All these actions will save you money on your electricity bill on top of protecting the environment. 9. Reduce your consumption and consume eco-friendly. Buy absolutely nothing that you don't really need. Buy clothes and accessories, furnitures, or electronic devices only when it is completely necessary when yours have reached the end of their lives, not before. Remember, climate change kills hundreds of thousands every year. What would you say if someone you loved died just because some people at the other side of the world just always want to buy fashion things? For the products we really need, like food, only buy seasonal and locally as much as possible. Buying local will sometimes be cheaper because you don't pay a middleman between you and the farmer. Not always. It will be more expensive for some products, true, but it will also bring jobs back to your country and city. The food will be fresher and healthier. You have just seen actions to do your part in fighting climate change. When do you know if you did enough? Scientists have estimated that when all of us will be at 2 tons of CO2 equivalent emitted by a person, we will be on the right track to limit the catastrophe. Of course, they know that it can take time to reduce our carbon footprint. For example, finding a job closer to home or that lets you work from home takes time. Saving to buy an electric car or improve the thermal isolation of your home takes time. As long as you are really doing your best, you have nothing to be ashamed about. Take the time it will take. If you want an idea of how far you currently are from the 2 tons per person target, you can click on the link in the description below to use a carbon footprint calculator. A good general guideline is to consume from now on no more than you consumed during COVID to stay within your CO2 budget. 10. Finally, an important action you can do is, of course, to spread the message. By simply sharing, a video can go viral, which means you have made a lot of good influencing many people. This video is copyright free, which means that anyone can directly upload it to their YouTube channel, social media, and then reshare it every week. For example, because we are all busy with work and paying bills. So we need regular reminders of why climate change means that we will suffer in the future and what we can do to stop it. Of course, just speaking about this with everyone around you is important. Finally, you can also write a comment because it makes the algorithm show the video to more people. For example, you can write in the comments how many of the 10 types of actions you are doing yourself to realize what you do good and where you can improve.